Imagine the scorching heat of the North African desert in 1941. German Panzer officers watched through binoculars with absolute smug amusement. They saw British and American supply trucks leaving trails of fuel. Valuable gasoline was simply evaporating into the hot, thirsty sand. The Allied containers were nothing more than a pathetic tactical joke. To the Germans, victory was a matter of basic, superior logistics. The Allied cans were officially known as the Flimsy by the troops. It was a thin, rectangular tin that leaked at every single seam. Soldiers used to say the cans were more dangerous than the enemy. One small spark could turn a supply truck into a funeral pyre. The High Command in London was paralysed by this leaking disaster. They had the fuel, but they had no way to keep it inside. Across the lines, the German soldiers looked remarkably well supplied and fast. They carried a heavy, olive-drab container that seemed almost indestructible. It didn't leak, it didn't rattle, and it opened with one hand. The German officers mocked the Allies for their inferior, leaking tins. They truly believed their engineering would win the war for them. It was a gap in quality that threatened to break the Allies. But the laughter in the German bunkers wouldn't last forever. Every time an Allied soldier saw a German can, he wanted it. They began to scavenge the battlefields for these mysterious green tins. They called them jerry cans because of who they came from. A silent realization was spreading through the entire Allied camp. The key to the war was hidden inside a simple piece of steel. The Wehrmachtskanister was a secret project completed back in 1937. Engineers in Berlin designed it to be the ultimate military tool. It featured 3 handles, so 1 or 2 men could carry it. The spout was wide and required no extra tools to be opened. It even had a special lining that allowed it to carry water. The Germans knew they had created the gold standard of warfare. To the German High Command, this can was a symbol of pride. They looked at the American mass production and felt truly superior. What good were 1,000 tanks if they ran out of fuel? The German can gave them a mobility that the Allies simply lacked. It was a silent steel advantage that kept their panzers moving fast. They guarded the blueprints like they were the most precious jewels. However, the Germans made one fatal mistake in their deep arrogance. They assumed the industrialized Americans were too proud to copy them. They thought the Allies would keep using their own failing designs. History shows that pride is often the fastest way to a downfall. While the Germans mocked, the Allies were already making a plan. A single captured can was about to change the entire global war. The secret was in the stamped steel and the nested welded seams. It was a design so perfect that it hasn't changed much today. The Germans felt invincible because they owned the means of supply. But a new shadow was falling over their prized invention that night. An American engineer was staring at a captured can with intensity. The era of the Flimsy was coming to a very sudden end. In late 1939, an American engineer managed to smuggle a can out. Paul Pleiss didn't bring home a new gun or a secret code. He brought a single green German container across the ocean to Ohio. He knew that this piece of steel was the future of victory. At first, the US military authorities actually refused to even look. They didn't want to admit that the enemy had a better design. But as the war intensified, the truth became impossible to ignore anymore. The Flimsy cans were failing on every single front of the war. Eisenhower himself began to demand a solution for the fuel crisis. The captured German can was pulled from the shelf and studied. It was a moment of deep humility for the great American industry. They had to admit that the Jerrys had out-engineered them for years. The reverse engineering process was a race against the ticking war clock. Every detail was measured, from the air pocket to the handles. Engineers worked in secret labs to replicate the German welding technique. They had to find a way to mass-produce this stolen genius. It was a mission of industrial espionage born out of pure necessity. The goal was to build a better version of the enemy's best tool. The German officers had no idea their secret was being duplicated. They continued to laugh at reports of Allied trucks stuck in mud. They believed their logistical edge was still a very safe bet. But in the heart of America, the factories were starting to roar. The stolen blueprint was now a weapon aimed at the German army. The first million jerry cans were ready to cross the Atlantic. When the American industrial giant finally woke up, the world trembled. Factories in Detroit stopped making cars and started making fuel cans. They took the German design and perfected it for the assembly line. Millions of cans began to pour out of the factories every month. It was a flood of steel that the Germans could never have imagined. The stolen secret was now being multiplied by the power of freedom. The Allied supply lines were suddenly transformed into a lethal machine. Trucks could now travel hundreds of miles without losing a single drop. The jerry can became the lifeblood of the entire push toward Berlin. Soldiers loved them so much they treated them like personal treasures. They used them as stools, pillows, and even for cooking their meals. The container that the Germans mocked was now the Allies' savior. The speed of the Allied advance began to shock the German command. They couldn't understand how the Americans were moving so very fast. They hadn't realized that their own engineering was now chasing them. The United States military had taken a German strength and made it ours. It was the ultimate act of industrial and strategic military revenge. The mocked Flimsy had been replaced by a wall of American steel. Eisenhower later remarked that the war couldn't have been won without it. He placed the jerry can among the most vital tools of victory. It proved that the Allies were wise enough to steal the best. The Germans had the invention, but America had the massive scale. The arrogance of the German officers had led them to a trap. The tool of their pride was now the engine of their destruction. By 1944, the German generals began to see a terrifying sight. In every captured Allied camp, they saw stacks of their own cans. At first, they thought the Americans were using captured German stock. But when they looked closer, they saw the US markings on steel. The realization hit them like a cold wave of pure strategic dread. The Allies had not just copied them, they had truly mastered it. It was a psychological blow to the heart of the German officers. They had always viewed themselves as the masters of modern engineering. To see their best invention being used against them was quite bitter. It meant that the logistical gap had finally closed for good then. The mockery of the flimsy supplies was now a distant memory. The hunter had become the prey, fueled by his own clever invention. The German soldiers on the ground felt the weight of this change. They were now the ones struggling with fuel and with basic parts. Meanwhile, the Allied tanks never seemed to stop or to slow down. The jerry can allowed for a flexibility that the Germans lost. It was, a ghost from their past, returning to haunt their future. The pride of Berlin was being crushed by the factories of Detroit. Honestly, this irony is one of the most fascinating stories of the war. A simple can proved that really no secret is safe from a smart enemy. The German officers who once laughed were now in a panic. They realized too late that the Americans were masters of adaptation. The war was no longer a duel of ideas, but of production. And the stolen can was leading the way to the very end. If you look at a fuel can in a store today, look closer. The design you see is almost identical to the 1937 German one. The three handles, the square shape, and the camlock lid remain. It's really a testament to the perfection of that original secret design. The world decided that you just can't improve on a true masterwork. The jerry can is still the standard for every modern military. The name jerry can stayed as a permanent mark of its origin. It's a linguistic scar, honestly, that reminds us of the jerrys we stole from. The Allied soldiers never let the name die out of deep respect. They knew that this tool had saved their lives in the mud. It remains one of the few things from the war still used, a legacy of steel that connects the past to our present day. It teaches us a vital lesson about the nature of true power. Power is not just about being first. It's about being the smartest. The Allies weren't too proud to take what worked from the enemy. They recognized genius and honestly had the might to make it their own. The German officers lost because they thought they were the only ones. Adaptation is, without a doubt, the most lethal weapon in any commander's dark arsenal. We often focus on the rockets and the jets of the war, but the jerry can is the hero that the history books forget. It's a story of theft, of industry, and of ultimate victory. Without that stolen piece of German steel, history would, honestly, be very different. The next time you see one, just remember the mockery and revenge. The smallest tools often carry the heaviest weight of our history. In the end, the story of the jerry can is, well, a mystery. It reveals the hidden mechanics of how a global war is won. It wasn't just about bravery, but about the flow of gasoline. Eisenhower's secret weapon was a can designed by his worst enemy. He was a leader wise enough to use the enemy's hand. The fatal mistake of the Germans was thinking we wouldn't learn. The final truth is that the war was a test of soul. The Germans built for status, but the Americans built for scale. By stealing the jerry can, the United States proved its lethal flexibility. They took a specialized tool and, made it a universal standard. The mockery of 1941 became the total surrender of May 1945. The Flimsy era was dead, and the era of the jerry had, well, won. We must always be ready to look at our enemies with clear eyes. They may have a secret that can save us, or honestly, can destroy. George Patton once said to learn the enemy's heart and mind. The jerry can allowed the Allies to do exactly that in steel. It is a haunting reminder of the cost of being too proud. History belongs to the one who can turn a secret into might. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the archives. The jerry can is a rare truth that few people truly know. The world is full of these patterns waiting to be found. Keep looking for the secrets that the textbooks often leave out. Until the next revelation, stay curious and stay very wise, friend. Thank you for spending your time with a friend like me.